was diagnosed last August when I was 25, a few weeks off 26, with bowel cancer. I was diagnosed through a cystoscopy, so they found the tumour in my bladder after 6 months of feeling unwell. In February last year I was hospitalised for suspected appendicitis, but they did scans, ultrasounds, CT scans. They couldn't even find my appendix and they wrote it off saying that it was probably just a UTI. My GP never really gave up on me in the fact that he did try and was going to try and diagnose something, and he ran heaps of tests. He sent me for CTs, ultrasounds, but yeah, I remember him saying that bowel cancer wasn't on the table because I was too young, and it wasn't until I got blood in my urine and I was sent to a urologist, who then also told me, look, we'll do a cystoscopy, but we're not going to find anything, you're too young, and I'll just do it to pretty much shut you up. And so I had the cystoscopy done, and I remember waking up in recovery. I was alone with just a nurse, and the nurse said, we found a tumour and we're pretty sure it's cancer. So I didn't have any of my family around me. My husband was about to pick me up from the hospital. I had nobody, and I had just woken up, so I wasn't really taking anything in and sort of digesting it. I went back onto the day surgery ward and then was told again, do you know what we found? And I said, all I remember is hearing the word cancer. And they said, yes, we've found a tumour and we're pretty certain it's cancer. You need to see a specialist in 2 weeks. So they then let me lie there for a good hour until I was allowed to be discharged. And I just remember walking down the hallway to my husband and him saying, is everything okay? And I said, let's just get to the car. They think that it's cancer. I went to the specialist 2 weeks later and they thought it was bladder cancer. And they then got the lab results back, and it was bowel cancer that had moved from my appendix through into my bowel and then through into my bladder. After I saw the urologist, I was then sent straight to the colorectal surgeon. He did a colonoscopy and he came out and said, yes, there's a tumour, so we're going to have to obviously remove the tumour. They just wanted to do surgery straight up, no chemo beforehand. I also needed part of my bladder removed as the tumour was in my bladder. I then found out that the tumour was probably touching my uterus, and I was told that there was a 99.9% chance that I'd have my uterus removed and my ovaries and all my tubes. So that was obviously very hard to take in, being so young and not having children yet, and I didn't have any time to make any options to freeze eggs or to even think about it. Then they took me into surgery. It was on the table that the surgeon rang my mum and said, she's still on the table, but we haven't touched her uterus or her ovaries. So that was great news. So I just had the top of my colon removed and part of my bladder. 2 weeks recovery time in hospital. With that, I didn't need a bag. I had a catheter for 2 weeks, went home for 36 hours, and then my bladder was leaking into my abdomen, so back into hospital. Was in hospital for another week and then had another surgery to fix my bladder. After that, I was basically told that they had taken all the cancer, they had taken lymph nodes out, and the lymph nodes I was originally told all had cancer, but then a day later was told that none of them had cancer, which was great news. I was told I wouldn't need chemotherapy, but to go and see an oncologist. So I rocked up at the oncologist thinking she's going to tell me that I won't need chemo, I'll be fine, and she said I want to start chemo in a week. So it was a preventative measure, but I didn't get time to freeze eggs, so once again that was hard to take, but I decided that having chemo was better to be around later in life than, thinking about having kids at this age. I just needed to be there. There are other ways to have children and I wanted to be there for them. So I started chemo in December. It was rough to begin with. I ended up in hospital a couple of times. It made me very sick. So I dropped one side of the chemo and just went with the oral tablets. And I'm now about to start my second last round of chemo. So being a young person with bowel cancer or going through bowel cancer, there is a stigma attached to it that it is an old person's disease, and it really isn't anymore. There's a lot of people being diagnosed with it who are young. It is hard to get diagnosed. The doctors say, you know, you are too young. But you know, if you have the symptoms, you do have to talk about it. It is embarrassing to talk about bowel habits and pooing and constipation, but you do have to talk about it if you feel like you are unwell and you know your body better than anybody else. You do just have to put that embarrassment aside, and not just think that it is an old person's disease, that anybody can get it and is susceptible to it.